You're listening to the CyberWire Network, powered by N2K.
And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific data criminals have in hand from InfoStealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show. New phishing techniques, arrests in the Genesis Market case, APT-43's Archipelago, Russia's turn in the Security Council chair immediately becomes an occasion for disinformation. Our guest is Nick Tausek from Swimlane to discuss supply chain attack trends. Tim Starks from The Washington Post has the latest on the DOJ's attempts to disrupt cybercrime. And make robo-love, not robo-war. Latest on nuisance-level hacktivism in the interest of Ukraine. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Thursday, April 6, 2023. Vade today released a report detailing a newly identified phishing campaign that utilizes YouTube attribution links and a Captcha in order to fly under the radar. The victims receive a fake email alerting them that their Microsoft 365 password has expired. In reality, the email comes from a hacker that utilizes display name spoofing in order to feign legitimacy. The email contains Microsoft's logo and branding, and provides a button with a link for the user to keep their same password. The link redirects to a YouTube URL and later a page with a Cloudflare Captcha. Once the Captcha is completed, the user will be redirected to a phishing page that auto-populates the email address of the user and provides a space to enter a password. Both YouTube and Cloudflare are commonly whitelisted, so using these URLs allows for the bypassing of much security software as well as email gateways. Vade advises good cyber hygiene and cautiousness around emails that ask for account access or credentials. Europol yesterday reported that Tuesday's seizure of the Genesis market was a combined operation involving 17 countries. 119 people were arrested, 208 properties were searched, and a reported 97 knock and talk measures took place. This combined effort was spearheaded by the U.S. FBI and the Dutch National Police. The DOJ yesterday disclosed that law enforcement had seized 11 domain names that were in support of the Genesis market infrastructure. A formerly little-noted cybercrime group, APT-43, was described by Mandiant in a report last week. The threat actor was also shown to have ties to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Mandiant explains that after 5 years of tracking the activities of APT-43, they can attribute the group to the DPRK because their collection priorities align with the mission of the Reconnaissance General Bureau, North Korea's main foreign intelligence service. Mandiant also highlights how APT-43 acquires and launders stolen cryptocurrency to fund its own espionage operations. This differs from other DPRK cyber threat actors who seem to funnel cryptocurrency to fund the DPRK government as a whole. Google released a follow-up report on the 5th of April, which focused on that subset of APT43's activities Google calls Archipelago. Google notes that it observed the group target individuals with expertise in North Korea policy issues, such as sanctions, human rights, and non-proliferation issues. Google goes on to expose how Archipelago conducts its phishing and various malware operations, explaining, Archipelago invests time and effort to build rapport with targets, often corresponding with them by email over several days or weeks before finally sending a malicious link or file. Google also notes, for several years, Archipelago focused on conducting traditional credential phishing campaigns. More recently, TAG has observed Archipelago incorporate malware into more of their operations. To protect their malware from AV scanning, Archipelago commonly password protects their malware and shares the password with recipients in a phishing email. It's Russia's turn to chair the United Nations Security Council, and it used its first week in that role to convene a meeting to share its own view of the widespread abduction of Ukrainian children. It featured a video presentation by the director of Russia's Child Protection Agency, Maria Lvova-Belova, presently wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes involving the kidnapped children. Ms. Lvova-Belova said she welcomed the opportunity to dispel the fakes and show the opposite side. She added that Russia did not recognize the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court and claimed that Russia's custody of the children was protective and that Moscow stands ready to help reunite the children with their families. Criticism of Russian policy, she said, amounted to lies designed to slander Russia. The New York Times quotes her as saying, "We have no doubt that this is a campaign to discredit our country and attempts to conceal their irresponsible actions about children." Several Western members of the Council walked out on the presentation, returning once it was over to denounce Russian disinformation. It seems likely that Russia's month in the chair will be devoted to more such tendentious propaganda, and putting a wanted alleged war criminal out there as your spokeswoman shows a lot of brass, and not in a good way either. And finally, in a rare filing from our teledildonics desk, we hear that the Ukrainian hacktivist group Cyber Resistance took control of an AliExpress account organized by the Russian blogger Mikhail Lukin to solicit donations for Russian forces. Numerama reports that the hacktivists then used the pirated account to spend about 23,000 euros on erotic novelties. Inform Napalm explained the move, stating, "The hacktivists of Cyber Resistance punished Z-volunteer Mikhail Lukin. They hacked his email and charged $25,000 worth of adult toys to his card, which is linked to AliExpress. He planned to spend the money to buy drones for the Russian army." The hacktivists themselves bragged in their own Telegram channel, posting, "Instead of drones, Misha will now have truckloads of other things useful to every Russian to the occupiers, which we ordered and paid for with his card on AliExpress." The original is clear on what the hacktivists invoiced for Mr. Lukin's card, but we're a family show, so we've redacted that part. But really, folks, AliExpress is Alibaba's e-commerce service, and apparently the hacktivist universe is like middle school. Alas, First Post says that Mr. Lukin attempted to return the items, but found that all sales were final, although some other sources say Mr. Lukin did get some money back. Apparently, he's stuck with a truckload of saucy marital aids, which he'll now just have to deliver to the front. In any case, he counter-boasted to the Cyber Resistance that he'll just resell them to Russians who want to buy such novelties, and that he'll do so at a 300% profit, all going to raise more money for Russia's cause. We hate to rain on Mr. Lukin's parade, but we have it on good authority that such reselling schemes no longer work very well, whatever the dropship gurus may have told him on TikTok. In any case, he must have a lot of inventory. We hesitate to even speculate how many romantic appliances 23,000 euros will fetch nowadays, But we're betting that it's what financial experts would call a lot. A whole lot. Coming up after the break, Nick Tausek from Swimlane discusses supply chain attack trends. Tim Starks from The Washington Post has the latest on the DOJ's attempts to disrupt cybercrime. Stay with us.
Never refactor your apps again. Never get locked into an IDP. Say goodbye to your old on-prem systems and identity management complexity. Now you can solve your biggest IAM problems with identity orchestration, even the messy ones you thought were unsolvable. Bring Strata any IAM use case like modernizing legacy apps to use passwordless authentication, migrating from one IDP to another, or enabling identity operation resiliency. Strata's identity orchestration platform is designed to extend the value of your identity infrastructure, no matter the complexity or scale. What's more, Strata's software is lightweight and flexible, developer-friendly, and vendor-agnostic. Want to see it in action? Share your identity challenge with Strata on a discovery call, and they'll hook you up with a complimentary pair of AirPods Pro. Don't miss out. Visit strata.io/cyberwire. That's strata.io/cyberwire.
Dreamport is a mission accelerator that combines state-of-the-art facilities, innovative programs, and imaginative people charged with finding that spark that leads to unparalleled capability. Headquartered in Columbia, Maryland, Dreamport was created through a partnership intermediary agreement with U.S. Cybercom, awarded to Missy in May 2018. For more information, please visit dreamport.tech. The U.S. federal government has taken a leading role in the reduction of supply chain attacks through the efforts of CISA and other supporting agencies. Despite the effort, reports indicate that supply chain attacks are on the rise. For more on this, I spoke with Nick Tausek, lead security automation architect at security firm Swimlane.
As an industry, supply chain attacks have been increasing steadily. I shouldn't say steadily, I should say exponentially, actually, year over year. This has been an increasing problem in scope and severity. In 2021, it was something over 600% year-over-year increase in supply chain attacks against the open source community. And then last year, in 2022, that number jumped up to like 750% year-over-year increase in open source supply chain attacks. So a lot of these attacks are going after a pretty broad swath of the industry, right? It's not just the federal government, but the feds are a pretty huge attack surface with a lot of resources devoted to trying to keep them safe and a lot of really juicy targets for all kinds of malicious actors who might be interested in breaking into a system. So I guess the short answer to that is that the supply chain attack problem is not going away. It's increasing exponentially, and the federal government remains a primary target for actors who are using this rapidly increasing attack vector to perform their malicious activities.
And what have we seen so far in terms of the federal government's response to this? What sort of defenses and protections have they put in place?
So as far as the federal government's responses are concerned, we've seen a lot in the last couple of years from the Biden administration, which has been really refreshing to see in regards to mandatory reporting requirements for various industries outside of just the most critical infrastructure. They just signed a new document called the National Cybersecurity Strategy, which differs a lot from previous iterations of this document that we've seen from every administration prior, in two ways. One of which is that it authorizes U.S. defense, intelligence, and law enforcement agencies to go more on the offensive against malicious actors to attempt to disrupt their activities. retaliate for cyber attacks and prevent cyber attacks. And it also includes more ample reporting requirements for industries and cybersecurity events inside the United States. For a long time, many of us in the industry have been asking for greater transparency and greater sharing of information to try to raise the tide for all organizations who are facing cybersecurity threats. But this is really a concrete step with these reporting requirements to make sure that organizations are actually sharing what information they can safely with a greater intelligence community to help kind of shore up everybody's defenses at once. And that's a really important message in the age of supply chain attacks, because as we saw with SolarWinds, for example, one compromised vendor can cause an enormous problem for the federal government, cause untold amounts of damages, and frankly make themselves almost inextricable from networks once they've gained a really strong foothold. It can take millions or potentially even billions of dollars to extract bad actors from some of these federal agencies once they've gotten a really deep toehold in.
What are some of your insights when it comes to this? I mean, what are some of the things that you and your colleagues there at Swimlane would recommend to government agencies in terms of getting on top of this?
So there's a few things. Supply chain attacks are notoriously difficult to prevent because you don't control the entire supply chain. The best you can do is engage with vendors you trust, make sure that they're following security controls like SOC 2 compliance, make sure that they're regularly audited to make sure that their cybersecurity posture is as good as it can be. But with supply chain attacks, and especially supply chain attacks against the open source community, these can have really huge ripple effects when compromises do occur to a code base. So what we recommend is leveraging security automation to allow you to respond more quickly when events do occur. This can be from the worst case scenario, an actual vendor is compromised and your environment has been breached and you need to shut down large swaths of your network or quarantine critical resources or disable a large number of compromised user accounts at once. This could also be something like supply chain attack does occur against a vendor, doing the documentation to decide whether or not you're affected by monitoring your critical assets and patching your critical assets. All of these actions can really be greatly assisted in speed and accuracy by security automation. So that's probably the primary thing I would say as far as being able to rapidly respond when a supply chain event does occur. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a SOAR platform. Of course, Swimlane is a SOAR vendor, so that's what we sell, but this can be homebrew automation as well. A lot of organizations have been incredibly successful with developing homebrew automation solutions. These high-code approaches tend to be very hands-on, take a lot of time and developer expertise, but they can be really, really critically fit into your environment to make sure that you have exactly what you need for your organization. So there's a whole different conversation about what kind of products that you could get into, but I think the most effective line to go into to mitigate supply chain attacks when they do occur is in the automation arena.
Does the U.S. government, with their massive purchasing power, is this an opportunity for them to really take a leadership role in kind of setting the standard for what's expected with supply chains?
Absolutely. The government, like you said, has an enormous amount of purchasing power and thereby an enormous amount of influence on the entire cybersecurity market as a whole. Besides being aggressive leaders in best cybersecurity practices, they should also continue to exert pressure on cybersecurity vendors to increase their own security postures. The open source community is a little bit trickier because anybody can contribute to it, and a lot of this work is done pretty pro bono. But when you're dealing with vendors, making sure that they're compliant with the latest security standards, their auditing procedures, and making sure that they're regularly validating their code base to make sure that they're not the victims of open source supply chain attacks that may have occurred.
That's Nick Tausek from Swimlane. And joining me once again is Tim Starks. He is the author of the Cybersecurity 202 at the Washington Post. Tim, always great to welcome you back.
Yeah, thanks.
So I want to touch with you today on, first of all, Operation Cookie Monster, which I have to say, as a lifelong Muppets fan, really grabbed my attention and my affection in their naming. But beyond my interest in it, Interesting move here from the FBI in terms of takedowns.
Yeah, I also, like you, I'm fascinated by the naming conventions of some of these things. I remember once writing an article about how they named military operations. This is another big takedown in just the last several weeks of these kinds of underground cybercriminal marketplaces. Genesis was specializing in access brokerage, being able to give people usernames, passwords, other ways to log into accounts that they'd stolen. And this was another really, really big market that they've taken down.
In today's Cybersecurity 202 at the Post, you have an interview with Lisa Monaco, who's Deputy Attorney General. Take us through that interview.
I was at the Aspen Verify conference last week and had requested a chance to speak with her, and it looked like we were going to arrange it, and then something happened at the Justice Department that was kind of big. Some ex-president, some guy got arrested or something.
I've heard of that.
Yeah. So we had to delay things until today, and we had a nice chat. I thought she gave a few newsy nuggets there. It wasn't just a generalized perspective, but she also did talk about philosophy. And because of the news of Genesis Market, that's where we started things. She had talked about this as exemplifying a twist or evolution in the way they've been doing disruptive operations.
Mm-hmm.
There's the traditional, of course, law enforcement arrest kind of operations that we're used to in cyber, or at least indictments and charges filed, but sometimes not arrested. In this case, they didn't just arrest people; they did arrest people. They also arrested people in the United States. They seized domains. They shut down the website. They shut down the entire marketplace, essentially. And the reason she said this was a variant was because of that access broker part. If you look at some of the other markets they've taken down, they've been things like people selling packets of information. Things like just credit card numbers or raw data on people. This was a little different in that sense. And then we had a broader talk about how they do these disruptions and what they mean. I had been wondering for a while, how do they decide when to do this kind of operation as opposed to doing something else? There was the situation with Kaseya a couple of years back. People who are deep into this will remember, where the FBI got in a little bit of controversy with the Capitol Hill over the fact that as my colleagues Ellen Nakashima and another reporter reported, had held on to some information about what was going on with Kaseya and had not sent out the decryption keys that they had access to right away. And that made me wonder, well, when do they decide to do these kinds of things versus when they don't? And what she said is there's no hard and fast rule. It is a thing where she has let everybody know in the department be looking for opportunities to do this.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. The focus on just the opportunism of looking for disruption. I thought was an interesting insight. You also touched on TikTok and the Restrict Act, which is certainly controversial in many ways. I have to say the answer she gave you on the Restrict Act was a little non-satisfying to me. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, backing up just slightly to what you said before the question. One of the things that seems to have really triggered this, let's be opportunistic, is ransomware, and the harm that it's caused to the United States over the years. And they've seemed to make some progress on that. That people have praised the law enforcement operations that are focused on disruption. But as we put in the newsletter a couple weeks ago, or actually just last week, people aren't entirely sure that's going to be a lasting change. So we'll see how that goes. The answer was interesting to me in this way. There are these First Amendment concerns about whether if the United States were to ban TikTok, whether that would be a violation of the First Amendment. It's a platform that people use to communicate, and the civil libertarians, Senator Rand Paul. So he certainly would consider himself civil libertarian, but we're talking about in some cases a range of ideological perspectives because he is more conservative than your traditional, what we think of as a civil libertarian. What was slightly interesting about that answer was she thinks that the Restrict Act puts them on stronger legal footing if there is any action taken. This is a case where the people who are doing the review of TikTok, the Committee on the Foreign Investment in the United States, is extremely secretive. They always meet behind closed doors. Getting a little bit of information about what they're doing is always a lot for them. I had asked her several questions about TikTok, and that was the only one she even came close to answering. So yeah, I hear you on unsatisfying. I think everybody is getting impatient, and by everybody I mean TikTok. I mean probably other people in the federal government. I think probably Capitol Hill. This negotiation has been going on for years now. When are we going to get a resolution for this? And I sense your frustration, and I share it a little bit just as a reporter. Like, I would really like to know what's going to happen here.
Yeah. I suppose, I mean, not satisfying, but also not surprising that it would be kind of a beige answer.
Yeah, it would, the other questions I asked her were maybe a little bit more specific, and maybe that's why she didn't answer them. I was really being careful I'd seen her talk about TikTok at the conference I just mentioned. So I knew what she wasn't going to want to talk about, but I tried to phrase things in a way that I thought would just be innocuous enough that she would answer them, or that they would be not making her touch on the specifics of the case. But she was pretty insistent on staying on that line of thinking, and I understand, like you said, unsurprising. I understand why, but it's also I wish they were talking more about this. I wish we knew more about what was happening.
Right. Well, I highly suggest that our listeners check out the interview with Lisa Monaco from the Department of Justice. Again, that's over on the Cybersecurity 202, which is authored by Tim Starks. Tim, thanks so much for joining us. And now, a word from our sponsor, Mimecast. You're wondering if you need more email and collaboration security, because, as it turns out, just protecting your workspace with M365 isn't good enough. You just watched your entire company grind to a screeching halt, all because someone opened a phishing email. Next time, don't rely on one-size-fits-all security. Protect your inbox with Mimecast and diversify your security stack. For a free trial, go to mimecast.com and keep your business from, falling apart. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. The CyberWire podcast is a production of N2K Networks, proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. This episode was produced by Liz Irvin and senior producer Jennifer Iben. Our mixer is Trey Hester with original music by Elliot Peltzman. The show was written by John Petrick. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. This episode is made possible in part by RSA Conference, where the world talks security. Through global events and year-round content, RSAC connects you to cybersecurity leaders and cutting-edge ideas for a safer, more secure future. Learn more at rsaconference.com/cyberwire23.